Come here to the 11 churches of Lalibela from all over Ethiopia and beyond.
We heard that it is totally different from other churches, and religion-wise we are told that if a person go to Lalibela and see, if you make a pilgrim, you will be righteous, and from generation to generation. So that's why we luckily come here and to see the church.
There's no doubt that Emperor Lalibela left the kingdom something lasting and significant. It might also provide me with another clue that takes me further back into the past in my search for the kingdom's origins. The architectural features are very distinctive. These shapes are thought to represent the rising sun, and the lower windows have a variety of cross designs. It's a double cross so that you can actually see it both as a cross and then also extruded. And then at the very top is this shape that you see everywhere. One of the things I'm beginning to think about this building is just looking at these windows, you are forced to ask the question, why? Why these shapes? But also, why go to this length of bother to create something quite so complex? But more intriguing than the windows are the blocks at each corner. They look almost like beams, but the way these churches have been created means that they're architecturally unnecessary. This building is completely made from solid rock, so there will be no need to have any supporting structures inside it. And yet it has some of those sorts of supports running all the way along the length of this building. The use of apparently structural features as pure decoration tells me that they've been copied from buildings that already existed. Architectural quotations, if you like. It also suggests that those earlier buildings may have been important to the people who built Lalibela. Remember, according to the Kebra Nagast, Lalibela was not descended from Solomon, so perhaps in copying an architectural style, he was emphasizing his claim to be the heir of earlier rulers. Maybe in this architecture lies Lalibela's claim to royal legitimacy, to biblical descent, and to greatness. But I don't know how old the buildings that inspired Lalibela might be, or whether they lead to a connection between the kingdom and Solomon and Sheba. To find out, I'm going to head even further into Ethiopia's past. This is one of the oldest inhabited places in the world. Archaeologists have discovered signs of the earliest human development here from over 4 million years ago. Even things that appear recent are ancient. These terraces in Tigray province are believed to have been ploughed for 3,000 years. In pre-colonial times, Ethiopia was the only sub-Saharan country to use the ox-drawn plough, a crucial step away from the pastoralist culture of the rest of the continent further to the south. The terraces rise from the bottom of the valleys to the mountain peaks, and they all have to be ploughed in time for the rains in a few weeks' time. I want to try my hand at a 3,000-year-old skill. I'm a natural. How is the out of a job here? Head, Velo. I nearly had my eye out there. How do I stop them? What do I do to them? Oh. There is a serious point to all of this, and it's that this method of agriculture was unique to these highlands, and it doesn't appear to have spread quickly to surrounding areas. It underlines the isolation, separateness of life here. It's hard work. It must be about 90 degrees out here. I must admit, I really wouldn't want this as a job. He's just as bad at steering as I am. I might have to give him a few tips, I think. We're 10,000 feet above sea level here. And visitors to towns like this are unusual. I wonder whether isolation like this is why Ethiopia's traditions seem to have lasted so long. They could develop independently and free from outside interference. But there are few places in the world more self-consciously cut off than my next destination. In the far north of Ethiopia lies Debre Damo, one of the most important sites in the country. Debre Damo is one of the oldest buildings in Ethiopia, and it sits on top of this imposing Table Mountain. It's a monastery dating back to the 6th century, and its famed isolation is justified. The only way to get to it is by climbing a rope made of goatskin up a steep cliff. And hopefully do a quick prayer for us as well. I need all the help I can get. Good luck, Haptamu.
Thank you.
It seems like a good idea to send Haptamu up first. He can show me how it's done. Oh. Oh. No, he's fine. Well done, Haptamu. Okay, let's get this safety on. This has worked for thousands of years. I mean, who am I to doubt it? I mean, even if my stomach is absolutely full of butterflies and doesn't seem completely convinced, I'm the sort of person who gets vertigo if I stand up too quickly. But I really want to see Debre Damo, so I think all of this is really worth it. Oh, I made it. Oh, that probably wasn't very dignified, but I don't care. Just look at those views. We're right on the top of the world. Coming up here, getting up here, I wouldn't have missed this for the world. It's just amazing. When the monastery was first established, it's believed that up to 1,000 monks lived up here. Today there are around 300. It's said to be one of the oldest permanently occupied Christian communities in the world, and it's at least 500 years older than Lalibela. It was built thanks to another Ethiopian emperor, Gabra Mescal. He ordered the construction of a colossal ramp to help get building materials up onto the plateau. Once the monastery was completed, the ramp was demolished and Debre Damo was isolated once more. And the monks continue to take their separation seriously. So they don't allow women up here, is that right?
That's why. No women.
No women at all?
No women at all.
And that's ever? There were never any women allowed up here? And that's the church. In fact, Ever since the 6th century, they haven't even allowed female animals to be brought up from the valley floor. The fact that Debre Damo has been so cut off for so long could be useful in my search for how this kingdom's traditions have echoed through the ages. I need to see the most important building here. Tomorrow I'm going to join the monks at a special service inside the 6th century church.
So we're going to try and get a little bit of shut-eye and then be up with the sun, because that's when the monks get up.
Like every religious ceremony I've seen in Ethiopia, their unique approach to Christianity is evident. But it isn't just the service that's catching my eye, it's the building it's being held in.
The most amazing thing is to see some of the features that I saw earlier in my trip, but used structurally. You begin to get a sense of that history that was being evoked by the architects of Lalibela and Gonda. But here, it's actually holding up this structure. This was what they were echoing.
Here are the square-ended beams I saw on the corners of the windows at Lalibela's rock churches. The rising sun window designs here too. And I last saw these distinctive long wooden beams in the castle at Gonda, where the architecture struck me as being from an older local tradition. And here it is in a 6th century church, made from small uneven stones. It's only these kinds of beams that can hold up walls like these. And another feature literally stands out. Different shaped beams which extend beyond the walls. These are called monkey heads.
I just tried to spend a few minutes just thinking about how this monkey head technology was actually put together. And what I think is that these heads represent the end of a sort of dumbbell-like piece of wood that sat across a beam. And basically, because the ends were wider than the body of these structures, it actually meant that the pressure from above helped to keep the building taut. This actually meant that you could actually build more than one story on these buildings.
Here is a distinct continuity of architectural styles, which it's almost certain were developed indigenously over nearly 2,000 years. If this continuity stretches back even further, to pre-Christian times, perhaps there is evidence somewhere of the connection to King Solomon and to the Queen of Sheba. Debre Damo deliberately cut itself off from the world. My next destination was once the busiest and most important city in Africa, Aksum.
The interesting thing is that at the time that Debre Damo was being founded, Aksum was a huge, thriving city. And I'm just reading this book, which is about Aksum at its height, about it being a huge ivory market and people coming from all about to trade with this enormous empire.
The book is the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a 1st century travel guide which describes Aksum as a thriving, bustling city. In fact, other documents of the time ranked Aksum alongside Rome, Persia and China as one of the 4 great world powers. Given its significance, I think it's remarkable we know so little about its history. After all, Aksum has a considerable claim to fame. This, according to Ethiopians and their Orthodox Church, is where the son of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon actually brought the Ark of the Covenant 3,000 years ago. Ethiopian Christians believe that beyond these walls is one of the foundations of the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Ark containing the Ten Commandments. Until 1974, that Ark was the cornerstone of the legitimacy of the kingdom itself. The existence of the Ark here would go a long way to prove that the Ethiopian dynasty of emperors was founded by King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. It would confirm the legends that have lasted for centuries. But the Ark is deemed so holy that no one is allowed anywhere near it.
I can't go beyond this point here, because in that chapel there is where the Ark of the Covenant is said to be held.
Security is tight, and it must be kept that way to maintain the faith in the foundations of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and by extension the legitimacy of centuries of kings. If the Ark is not inside this building, then the foundations of the church and the Ethiopian royal line would be destroyed. But the Ark is not the only potential evidence of this kingdom's ancient heritage. My search for Ethiopia's past continues, right next to the Ark's purpose-built resting place.
And now that building may be very new, but come and have a look over here. Down here is something very, very old. This is the remains of a building which is 4th century, said to have been built by King Ezana.
Ezana, archaeologists believe, was responsible for Ethiopia's first Christian church. He was the first Ethiopian emperor to convert to Christianity. Archaeologists know this for certain because coins minted during his rule show almost the moment of Ezana's conversion. One coin has a Christian cross in its design, but another, earlier coin, shows the pre-Christian religious symbol of the crescent moon and the sun. This is hugely significant. It means that there was a continuity of ruler before and after Ethiopia became a Christian country. The Judeo-Christian tradition here does seem to be unbroken. The coins confirm another fact. By the 4th century, this was a significant, well-established kingdom. This was the only place in sub-Saharan Africa at that time known to have issued currency. The coins aren't the only objects in Aksum that show the power this place had at the beginning of the Christian era. These are the grave markers, or stelae, of the emperors at Aksum. They were made from solid granite, and some date back to the 1st and 2nd centuries. They are thought to be the largest pieces of stone ever to come out of a quarry in the ancient world. The tallest stood at over 30 meters and weighed around 500 tons. I think they're as impressive as any monument I've seen in Athens or Rome. My guide here, Yagalam Fisheha, is showing me their amazing carvings, which are still beautifully clear almost 2,000 years after they were made. They depict the great buildings it was believed the emperors would inhabit in the afterlife, skyscrapers to immortality.
This architecture was the architecture of the Aksumite people. It's an architecture of a building.
Yes.
Multi-story house.
I see.
Multi-story house. Have you
And
got
then these are the...
wooden beams. They represent, the end of the wooden beams. When the Aksumites were practicing this architecture, first they started with wood. So we have the windows. So we have the wooden beams. Then we have another. So this in general is multi-story house building.
I've seen this before. This is the architecture used at Debre Damo around 500 years later. And over 1,000 years later, it appears to have inspired the stonework of the churches of Lalibela. At the top is a symbol of the rising sun once more.
I've had just a very quiet epiphany moment when this journey has begun to really make sense. I mean, this stela, this single piece of rock, holds many of the elements that I've seen on my journey up until now, but here configured in a way that gives them a kind of sense, gives them a continuous historical narrative, which I suppose is the history of Ethiopia.
The features on these stelae, marking the ancient burial places of Ethiopian emperors 2,000 years ago, have been consciously echoed down the years by the emperors that followed them. What I'm seeing at Aksum are continuous traditions taking the story of the Ethiopian kingdom back to the beginning of Christianity. But I still want to find evidence that the kingdom might go back even further, to the days of Solomon and Sheba. Yergalem has one more ancient artifact to show me.
Wow, what's this?
Here we have a memorial stone inscription which was written in the beginning of the 4th century by King Ezana,
Wow.
the first Christian king of Aksumite kingdom.
So what's inscribed on it?
The message of the inscription is more about his military victories and more about his political power.
It's a proclamation, a kind of tourist information sign, telling visitors to Aksum about the might of the emperor. And it's multilingual, the inscriptions in the local Ge'ez language, still used in church traditions. It's in the international language of the day, ancient Greek, and it's in a language called Sabaean. Sabaean was spoken only for a brief time, and only in this part of Africa and southern Arabia. Historians think it died out around the 8th century, but it first appeared around 1000 BC. It's the language of Saba, the part of Yemen where the Queen of Sheba is said to have come from. This stone is from the 4th century AD, 1400 years after the Queen of Sheba is supposed to have reigned. It's not the Ark of the Covenant, but it does point me deeper into the past in my search for the kingdom's origins. It's thought that the kingdom of Aksum was a continuation of a civilization which had existed nearby. That's where I'm headed now. Just 20 miles away is the town of Yeha. It could be the Old Testament world I've been looking for. In this ancient town is a pre-Christian temple. There were worshippers here when the Old Testament prophets were writing.
Over here, there would have been an altar. And it's quite a deep well beneath the altar because there would have been ritual sacrifice here. This would have been a place in which the blood would have been allowed to drain.
An important part of Old Testament Judaism was making offerings in the form of slaughtered sheep and goats.
And this may well have been a baths where people would have come to cleanse themselves. I mean, this building suggests all sorts of things.
Not much is known about the people who built this temple, but archaeologists believe this is the oldest surviving building in Ethiopia.
And it predates everything that we've seen up until now. And the quality of this brickwork, it just belies the fact that this building is 500 BC.
That means it's older than the Parthenon in Greece, and centuries older than Rome's Colosseum. It echoes the Judaism of the Old Testament, the faith that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims was adopted here 1,000 years before Christ. And it echoes what the patriarch told me at the start of my journey.
So we accepted Judaism. Then we accepted Christianity. Now it is 3,000 years old altogether.
But the most exciting thing about this temple is a collection of artifacts found inside it. They're now kept nearby in this small Christian church. And I think they might offer a final clue about Solomon, the Queen of Sheba, and the ancient kingdom of Ethiopia.
Praise God day. Yeah. Thank you. I didn't know it would be like this.
There are crosses and scriptures spanning many years of Christianity.
Thank you.
And there's an incense burner which doesn't belong in any church. It's been carved with the pre-Christian symbol of the crescent moon and the sun. Archaeologists think it dates from the 5th century BC. And from the same era as the burner are these stones, inscribed in the language of the Queen of Sheba, Sabaean. These are almost certainly objects from the time of the Old Testament, and they show an ancient link between Ethiopia and Saba, the home of the Queen of Sheba.
This takes us back to, well, to the very beginning. I mean, a lot of people talk about the Queen of Sheba, and here you're showing me a stone inscription which may well mean that all of that is true.
It's pre-Christian evidence of the Queen of Sheba's language in the heart of ancient Ethiopia. It means it's just possible that the legend of her son founding Ethiopia's kingdom is based in fact. I wanted to find out whether there was any truth in the legend of Ethiopia's kingdom being founded by the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. In Ethiopia, separating legend from fact is difficult. The stones in the church, inscribed with the Sabaean characters, are estimated to be 2,500 years old. Not quite the 3,000 years the church claims for its connection to the Old Testament, but not far off. And whilst there might not be proof of a blood connection to Solomon, there is a striking cultural connection to the world of the Old Testament. It's also striking that faith in this legend has lasted for centuries, closely tied to the unique traditions of the Ethiopian church. I think it's endured because of Ethiopia's determination to resist the influence of outsiders and to remain independent.
Ethiopia's emperors may have died out, but the kingdom in many senses still survives. In the language, in the people, in the history, in the traditions. It's an extraordinary history, a proud history, one that deserves to be better known.